My own children left me on the side of County Road 27 with nothing but a suitcase, thinking I was helpless. They were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. My name is Anna Miller. I'm 68 years old, and this is how I destroyed my children's plan to steal everything my husband and I built. I was born Anne Marie Schwartz, became Anna Miller when I married Heinrich in 1980, and remained that person until 3 weeks ago, the day after his funeral. I'm 68 years old with arthritic hands that still remember how to bake the sourdough bread my son Benjamin used to demand every Sunday morning, and how my daughter Lisa's hair felt when I braided it for elementary school. I'm telling you this so you understand that before the collapse, I was simply a mother who believed she had raised good children. Heinrich's cancer took 14 months to kill him. Pancreatic cancer, the silent executioner that gives you just enough time to put your affairs in order, but not enough to live with the knowledge. At first, we kept it secret, just between us. Our children were busy with their own lives. Benjamin with his career as a financial advisor in Chicago that forced him to miss every important family gathering, and Lisa with her constantly failing wellness businesses in Seattle that always needed one more investment from Dad. They don't need this burden yet, Heinrich had said, staring at our bedroom ceiling. The morphine made his words slightly slurred. Let them live their lives a little longer without this shadow. I nodded because I loved him, but I knew better. I knew our children. When they finally arrived at our modest farmhouse on the edge of Fieldkirk, Iowa, the house where they'd grown up, where Heinrich and I had built the Miller orchards from 50 acres of neglected apple trees into one of the most respected organic fruit operations in the state, they didn't come with comfort. They came with questions about the will. Mom, I'm just trying to be practical, Benjamin said. His voice took on the condescending tone he'd perfected after his first 6-figure bonus. We were sitting at the kitchen table. Heinrich was sleeping upstairs when he brought it up. The medical bills must be piling up. Have you thought about selling the house? Running the business alone can't be easy for you. Benjamin had left Fieldkirk at 18, calling rural Iowa as suffocating as the soil that had financed his education. He only came when absolutely necessary, preferring to stay at a hotel rather than his childhood bedroom because the country air irritated his sinuses. Yet suddenly, in his father's final weeks, he developed a deep interest in the family business that had embarrassed him in his youth. Lisa came 3 days later with 6 suitcases and the scent of expensive failure. 5 wellness companies in 7 years. Each started with her father's money, each abandoned when real work was required. But she hugged Heinrich with genuine tears and slept beside his bed the night before he died, which is why I still struggle with what came after. The funeral was small, just as Heinrich would have wanted. He was buried on a hill overlooking the orchards, where the spring blossoms were just beginning to sprout. I stood between my children as they lowered him into the earth. Benjamin's arm stiff around my shoulders, Lisa crying openly into a monogrammed handkerchief I'd never seen before. He's at peace now, the pastor said. I wondered if that was true, or if it's just what you say when someone dies after long suffering. Heinrich and I weren't religious, but we'd maintained the social custom of occasional church attendance. Enough that Pastor Weber knew to focus on Heinrich's love of the land, not heavenly rewards. What I remember most from that day was the silence afterward. The house echoed with it as people brought casseroles and spoke in hushed tones about Heinrich's kindness, his integrity, how he'd helped Mr. Peters save his dairy during the recession, or employed the Schmidt brothers every summer. No one mentioned how he'd built our business from nothing while raising 2 children who apparently hadn't inherited any of his values. I've prepared the guest rooms, I told Benjamin and Lisa that evening as the last visitors left. I thought we could go through some of your father's things together tomorrow. About that, Mom, Benjamin said, setting down his whiskey glass with a precision that reminded me of his father. Lisa and I have talked, and we think it's best if we settle things quickly. We both need to get back. Settle things? I asked. The inheritance, Lisa said, scrolling on her phone. The house, the business. Benjamin and I need to clarify next steps. I'd expected grief from my children, perhaps memories of their father. Instead, I got a board meeting. Benjamin opened his laptop on the dining table where we'd celebrated their birthdays, their graduations, their departures. Dad talked to me about this last year, he said without looking me in the eye. He was worried about how you'd manage the mortgage. The business needs modernization, investment. The house is too much for someone your age." "My age," I repeated. The words tasted bitter. "I've run this orchard alongside your father for 40 years. And you've done wonderfully," Lisa said, in the tone she used when selling overpriced vitamins to desperate women. "But it's time to think about your future, Mom. A senior living facility would give you friends, activities." "I have friends. I have activities." My voice sounded foreign even to my own ears. "This is my home." "It's all our home," Benjamin corrected. "And Dad left the business to Lisa and me in the will. He wanted us to take care of you, but he knew the business needs younger leadership." I stared at my son, this stranger in expensive clothes who thought he knew something about the land that had fed him, the trees his father had nursed through droughts, diseases, and frosts. "Show me the will." He slid a document across the table, not our family attorney's letterhead, but something printed on Benjamin's company paper. Heinrich's signature looked somehow wrong. Too perfect, too even for a man whose hands had trembled with pain for months. "You had him sign this while he was on morphine." The anger rising in me was something primal, something I hadn't felt since I'd chased away a fox with a broom that tried to get into our chicken coop when the kids were small. He was lucid, Benjamin insisted. He wanted us to make a fresh start with the business. "There's an investor interested in the land." "An investor," I repeated. "For a luxury housing development," Lisa explained, her eyes lighting up at the prospect of money. "They're paying $7 million. Mom, we can all start over, as if the life Heinrich and I had built was something old, something to be thrown away. As if the legacy of Miller Orchards, our sustainable farming methods, our refusal to sell to big supermarket chains that would exploit our workers, our annual donation of 10% of our harvest to local food banks, was nothing compared to the prospect of uniform. Houses for wealthy weekend visitors from Chicago. Your father would never have sold this land for development," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I haven't signed anything." "You don't have to," Benjamin explained with practiced patience. "The business was in Dad's name. The house, too. Iowa isn't a community property state." That's when I knew they'd planned it. Not just after Heinrich got sick, but maybe long before. How long had my son been waiting for his father to die to liquidate our life's work? How many times had Lisa called, not to ask about Heinrich's health, but to make sure their plan was still on track? "I need time," I said, standing up. "I'm going to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow." But there would be no more talking. While I lay awake in the bed I'd shared with Heinrich, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar creaks of our old farmhouse, my children were preparing their final moves. Morning came with the smell of coffee, the expensive kind Benjamin had brought from Chicago because our local brand was undrinkable. I dressed slowly, my joints stiff with grief, age, and the cold knowledge of what my children had become. When I came downstairs, they were waiting with a small suitcase I didn't recognize. "We packed some essentials for you," Lisa said cheerfully. "Benjamin and I thought we'd drive you to Sunny Meadows today. It's a beautiful senior residence, only 2 hours from here." "I'm not going to any senior residence," I replied, pouring myself coffee. "This is my home." "Mom, be reasonable," Benjamin said. "The papers are done. We're closing with the investors next week. You can't stay here." I looked at my son, really looked, and found nothing of Heinrich in his face. Nothing of the boy who'd once followed his father through the orchard at dawn, asking endless questions about pollination and tree pruning. Only a stranger who saw me as an obstacle to be managed. "I need my medications from the bathroom," I said quietly. "And I want to take some photos." "Sure, Mom," Lisa agreed, relief in her voice. "Take whatever personal items you want. We can send the rest later." I went through my home one last time, touching the worn banister that Heinrich had sanded and refinished every 5 years, the quilt my grandmother had made that lay across our bed, the windowsill where I'd read stories to the children on rainy afternoons. In the bathroom, I retrieved my medications, but also my passport and birth certificate from the hidden compartment in the medicine cabinet that Heinrich had built when we were afraid of burglaries in the late 80s. In the bedroom closet, behind Heinrich's collection of flannel shirts that still smelled faintly of him, I retrieved the small fireproof box containing the one thing my children knew nothing about. When I came downstairs, my purse was heavier, but my heart somehow lighter with resolve. "Ready?" Benjamin asked, not really a question. I nodded and allowed Lisa to take my arm as if I were already the frail old woman they wanted to make me. We drove in Benjamin's rental car, a black SUV with leather seats that stuck to my legs. I watched my home disappear through the rear window, memorizing the sight of spring buds on the apple trees, the weathered red of our barn, the stone chimney Heinrich had rebuilt the summer before Benjamin was born. We drove through Fieldkirk's small center, past the elementary school where I'd volunteered, past the community center, where I still taught quilting classes on Wednesday evenings. But instead of getting on the highway toward the larger towns where senior residences were located, Benjamin turned onto County Road 27, a rural route that led through fields before eventually connecting to the interstate. 20 minutes later, he pulled over to the side of the road next to an empty field. The engine idled as he turned to face me. "This is where you get out, Mom," he said, his voice eerily calm. "The house and the business are mine now." "What?" Even Lisa looked confused. "Benjamin, what are you doing?" "What we discussed," he hissed. "Mom won't make it easy. She'll contest the will, make scenes, embarrass us in front of the investor. This is cleaner. She has her medications, some clothes. There's a gas station 5 miles up. She can call one of her quilting friends." He reached across me to open my door. "Get out, Mom." I looked at my son, searching for any sign of the child I'd loved, and found nothing. Then I turned to Lisa, whose wide eyes were darting between us, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Lisa?" I asked, but I already knew. She would follow him. She always had. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "It's just, we need the money. I have debts." I nodded once, took my purse and the small suitcase they'd packed, and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. The spring air was cool, smelling of fresh earth and the promise of rain. I stood there, clutching my bag as Benjamin drove away without looking back, Lisa's pale face visible through the rear window until they crested a hill and disappeared. No phone, no money, they thought. Just my name and what they didn't know I still possessed. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. I was free. Free from pretending these people deserved my love just because I'd given them life. Free from the burden of maternal duty toward children who saw me as nothing but an obstacle. I began to walk, not toward the gas station Benjamin had mentioned, but toward a future they couldn't imagine. In my bag were my passport, my medications, and a deed. The original deed for 50 acres of land purchased in my maiden name before I married Heinrich, before Miller orchards grew. The most profitable 50 acres as it happened, including the water rights any investor would need. My children thought they'd left me with nothing. They would soon learn how very wrong they were. The walk back to town took almost 2 hours. My shoes, the comfortable flats I'd worn to Heinrich's funeral, weren't made for country roads. By the time I reached Meyer's gas station and convenience store in Fieldkirk, my feet had blisters and the afternoon sun had burned my neck. I didn't care. Pain has a way of clarifying things, and with each step, my purpose had crystallized. I didn't go inside immediately. Instead, I sat on the bench outside the store and watched pickup trucks and sedans come and go. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that Anna Miller, who'd judged their apple pies at the county fair for 20 years, had been left like trash on the roadside by her own children. "Mrs. Miller?" I looked up to see Carl Meyer, the third-generation owner, wiping his hands on his apron. "Everything all right? You look a little pale." "Just taking a break, Carl. It's been a long day." He nodded, glancing at my suitcase. "I'm so sorry about Heinrich. He was a good man." "Yes, he was." I straightened up. "Carl, could I use your phone? I forgot mine." "Of course you can." He led me inside, past the beer coolers and snack racks to the small office behind the counter. "Take your time." I didn't call my quilting friends as Benjamin had suggested. I called Klaus Hartmann, our family attorney for 30 years. "Anna, I tried to reach you yesterday. I was surprised not to see you at the will reading." My hand tightened around the receiver. "What reading?" Klaus was silent for a moment. "The will reading. Your son submitted a document, but I had concerns. I tried to contact you." "I was indisposed," I said, my voice calm despite the rage building inside me. "Klaus, I need your help. And I need discretion. You have both. My office in an hour." "I'll be there." I bought a cheap prepaid phone with cash. I'd hidden in a compartment of my purse. Emergency money. Heinrich had insisted we both carry after we'd been stranded with a flat tire years ago. I also bought a bottle of water and a sandwich I had no appetite for. Carl refused to take my money. On the house, Anna. If you need anything else, just ask. His kindness almost made me cry. Almost. But I hadn't cried when they lowered Heinrich into the earth, and I wouldn't cry now. Klaus's law office was on the second floor of a Victorian building on Main Street. When his secretary saw me, her eyes widened. "Mrs. Miller, Mr. Hartman is expecting you." She rushed from behind her desk. "Would you like anything? Water, coffee?" "I'm fine, Helga. Thank you." Klaus met me at his office door, his tall frame bent with age, but his eyes as sharp as ever. He'd been a year behind Heinrich in school, had handled our business incorporation, our wills, everything legal in our lives. "Anna." He led me to a leather chair and sat not behind his desk, but in the chair beside me. "Tell me what's happening." I did. The conversation after the funeral, the suspicious will, the drive and the abandonment. With each detail, Klaus's expression grew grimmer. "The will they showed you," he said when I'd finished, "was not the will Heinrich and I prepared last year. Their document is a forgery." I thought as much. I opened my purse and retrieved the fireproof box. From it, I pulled the deed for the original 50 acres. "They don't know about this." Klaus examined the deed and nodded slowly. "Smart, very smart. You two always thought ahead. Heinrich suggested putting this parcel in my maiden name when we expanded. Insurance, he called it, in case the business failed. And now it's a different kind of insurance." Klaus carefully placed the deed on his desk. "What do you want to do, Anna?" I looked him in the eyes. "I want my home back. I want the business my husband built. And I want my children to understand exactly what they've done." Klaus didn't flinch at the coldness in my voice. Instead, he nodded. "Let's start with a place for the night. My sister's bed and breakfast has a vacancy. Tomorrow we'll begin the legal work." "No," I shook my head. "I need to move faster. The investor closes next week." Understanding dawned in Klaus's eyes. "You're not planning to just go through the courts." "Courts are for people with time, Klaus. I have a better idea." That night, in the flower-patterned comfort of Rose Hill B&B, I made my first call. Not to my children. They could wonder where I was, whether I'd made it to town or collapsed by the roadside. My call went to Harold Winter, the regional manager of Iowa Community Bank, which Miller Orchards had done business with for decades. "Mrs. Miller, my condolences on your husband." "Thank you, Harold. I'm calling because I've discovered concerning transactions, and I need your help to protect what's left of our business." My second call went to Martin Adler, the agricultural consultant who'd worked with us for 15 years. "Anna, I was at the funeral but couldn't get to speak with you." "I know, Martin. It was chaotic. Listen, I need information about a possible development on agricultural land in the county." My third call went to Sophie Delaney, editor-in-chief of the Fieldkirk Gazette and Heinrich's second cousin. "Anna, how are you holding up? I've been worried. I'm managing, Sophie. But I think there's a story you might be interested in. About investors, protected agricultural land, and inheritance fraud." By midnight, I'd made 7 calls, each one a thread in the web I was spinning. Outside my window, the quiet streets of Fieldkirk slept peacefully, unaware that Anna Miller, always the peacemaker, always the caregiver, was planning a war. In the morning, I met Klaus at his office with a notebook full of notes. "I need you to freeze the business accounts," I told him, "and I need an injunction against the sale of the property based on the forged will." Klaus reviewed my notes, his eyebrows rising. "This is comprehensive. I had 40 years with Heinrich. I know every contract, every customer, every detail of this business." I leaned forward, "And I'm going to use all of it. Your children won't take this lying down. I'm counting on it." By midday, the wheels were in motion. Klaus had filed the injunction. Harold had frozen the business accounts for suspicious activity. Martin had informed the environmental agency about protected wetlands on the proposed development site, wetlands that happened to be on my 50 acres. I sat in Klaus's office, watching the clock tick toward 1 p.m., when my children would discover their carefully constructed plan had hit its first obstacle. My phone rang. The new prepaid, whose number they shouldn't have, but Klaus had made sure they got it. I let it ring 4 times before answering, my voice calm. "This is Anna. Mom." Benjamin's voice crackled with barely controlled anger. "What have you done?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I've only just begun." "Mom, be reasonable," Benjamin said, his voice growing harder. "You can't just freeze accounts and file injunctions. Do you have any idea what you're doing to our deal?" "Your deal," I corrected. "Not mine, not your father's. Where are you?" Lisa interrupted, her voice shrill. Benjamin had obviously put me on speaker. "We've been sick with worry." The lie hung between us like a toxic cloud. They hadn't called the police or contacted friends. They'd been too busy finalizing their betrayal. "Worried that I survived?" I asked, my voice completely calm. "Worried that I didn't just disappear?" "That's not fair," Lisa whined. "Benjamin made a mistake." "Shut up, Lisa," Benjamin hissed. I smiled into the phone, their unity already crumbling. "Listen carefully. I'm giving you one chance to walk away with something. Withdraw the forged will. Sign the business and house back to me. In return, I'll give you each a one-time payment of $50,000. After that, we're done." Benjamin laughed, an ugly sound. "You're crazy. You have nothing. The will is legal." "The will is a forgery," Klaus interjected, leaning toward the speakerphone on his desk. "As the attorney who drafted Heinrich Miller's actual will, I can testify to that." Silence stretched across the line. "You have 24 hours, I said. "After that, the offer expires and I move forward with fraud charges." I hung up before they could respond. Klaus leaned back in his chair. "They'll probably refuse. I'm counting on it." I stood, taking my purse. Now I need to go to the bank in person. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and quiet meetings in back rooms throughout Fieldkirk. People who'd known me for decades, known us, Heinrich and me, stepped forward with information, signatures, and support. Not out of pity, but out of respect, and perhaps a trace of satisfaction at seeing the Miller children who'd left their hometown for shinier places get their comeuppance. By evening, I'd moved into a small apartment above Lottie's bakery. The owner, Lottie Brown, had been my friend since our children went to kindergarten together. "Stay as long as you need," she said, pressing the key into my hand. "That boy of yours never did right by this town. Or by you and Heinrich." I slept surprisingly well that night, lulled by the familiar sense of bread and pastries rising from below. In the morning, I dressed in clothes Lottie had loaned me, jeans and a sweater that fit well enough, and prepared for war. At exactly 9 a.m., when the county recorder's office opened, I filed documents confirming my ownership of the original 50 acres, including the main house, the barn, and crucially, the water access any investor would need. At 10 a.m., I met with the Department of Agriculture about conservation easements Heinrich and I had quietly established years ago, restrictions that would make development nearly impossible, even if Benjamin somehow managed to sell. By noon, I was sitting with Sophie in the Fieldkirk Gazette office, providing documentation for a story with the headline, "Local Orchard at Center of Inheritance Dispute. Investor Plans Threaten Protected Agricultural Land." At 2 p.m., my phone rang again. "The offer's off the table," I said in greeting. "Mom, you're making a terrible mistake," Benjamin said, the arrogant tone replaced with something closer to panic. "The investor's lawyers are threatening to sue if we don't deliver as promised." "Sounds like your problem. Our problem?" Lisa broke in. "Mom, please. I used the advance to pay off debts. If this falls through, I'm ruined. You should have thought of that before you left me on the roadside." "That was Benjamin's idea," she sobbed. "I didn't know until we were already driving. The betrayal between them brought me no satisfaction." Nothing about this brought satisfaction, only a cold, necessary sense of justice being served. "The bank records show you withdrew $50,000 3 days before your father's funeral." "Lisa," I said, my voice clinically distant, "were you already planning your fresh start?" She began to sob. Dramatic, heaving sobs I'd heard countless times when she didn't get her way. "It's too late for tears," I continued. "Klaus will send the paperwork. You both sign and relinquish all claims to Miller Orchards and the house. In return, I won't press charges for fraud, attempted elder abuse, and theft. And the $50,000? Benjamin asked, his business mind still calculating. That offer expired, I replied. You stay out of prison, that's all. I hung up, set the phone down, and stared out Klaus's office window at the town where I'd spent my entire adult life. Across the street, the farmer's market was being set up, like every Thursday. People went about their business, greeting neighbors, checking produce, living normal lives where children didn't abandon their mothers on roadsides. They'll fight, Klaus said, setting a cup of tea beside me. Let them. I didn't touch the tea. I need to make one more call. I dialed a number I'd memorized decades ago but rarely used. Robert, this is Anna Miller. I think it's time to call in that favor. Robert Wagner had been Heinrich's roommate at the University of Iowa before we met. They'd remained friends even after Robert moved to Des Moines to found one of the largest real estate law firms in the state. 30 years ago, Heinrich had loaned Robert money when his first practice collapsed. Money that rebuilt a firm now known for crushing predatory investors. Anna. His voice warm with recognition. I was going to call since I heard about Heinrich. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Robert. I need your help with a matter. I explained everything. The forgery, the abandonment, the investor. Robert listened without interruption. When I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought the connection had dropped. I'll be in Fieldkirk first thing tomorrow morning, he said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. These investors, Platinum Properties, have been on our radar for a long time. Anna, what they're planning violates at least 6 environmental regulations. We've been looking for a way to stop them. And now you have one? Yes. I heard him rustling papers. Don't sign anything before I get there. And Anna, I'm sorry about your children. I stopped having children 3 days ago, I replied. Now I only have adversaries. That night, I sat in Lottie's kitchen while she closed up the bakery, drinking tea and watching her prepare dough for the morning. You should eat something, she said, nodding at the sandwich she'd made me. You need your strength. I'm not hungry. I'd had no appetite since Heinrich died. Food was just fuel now, nothing more. Heard Lisa's staying at the Fieldkirk Inn, Lottie said, kneading with practiced movements. Benjamin's still at the house. People are talking. Let them talk. Small-town gossip had always annoyed my children, but now it served me. Every one of their moves reached me within hours. Sophie's article comes out tomorrow, Lottie continued. Front page. Also got a call from the Des Moines Register. They want to pick up the story, something about the investors' problems with other projects. The Miller farmhouse looked exactly as I'd left it 4 days earlier. White clapboard siding glowing in the afternoon sun. Heinrich's rocking chair still on the porch where he'd spent his last mobile days watching the orchards bloom. Only Benjamin's rental car in the driveway marked any change. Do you want me to come in? Robert asked as he pulled up behind the car. No. This part I do alone. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. I walked through the first floor, noting small disturbances. Benjamin's laptop on the dining table, a half-empty whiskey glass beside it, muddy shoes by the door that he never would have left there when he still lived here. Benjamin, I called out. My voice echoed through the rooms that had witnessed 40 years of my life. No answer. I climbed the stairs, my hand trailing along the banister Heinrich had hand-carved in our first year in the house. Upstairs, I noticed the bedroom door was ajar, light spilling into the hallway. I pushed it open. Benjamin stood at the window, staring out at the orchard, his back to me. The room was ransacked, drawers pulled out, closet doors open, Heinrich's possessions scattered across the bed we'd shared for 4 decades. Looking for something? I asked coldly. He didn't flinch, didn't turn around. I know there has to be more. Dad wouldn't have left everything to you. Your father trusted me, something you obviously never learned. Now he turned. His face was twisted with something between anger and desperation. You destroyed everything. The deal's collapsed. Lisa's creditors are calling. My firm is investigating why I took so much time off without explanation. Actions have consequences, I replied simply. Is that what this is? A lesson? He laughed bitterly. Always the teacher, even now. Not a lesson, I corrected. Justice. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out an old leather-bound copy of Walden, Heinrich's favorite book, which he'd read to me on long winter evenings when the children were sleeping. Between the pages, I withdrew a sealed envelope. Your father wrote this for you the week before he died. I was going to give it to you after the funeral, before I understood what you really are. Benjamin reached for it, but I held it back. Did you even mourn him? Or were you too busy planning how to profit from his death? Something flickered across his face. Maybe shame. Maybe just anger at being caught. I loved Dad. You loved what he offered you, I corrected. Security, status, a safety net for your riskier ventures. What was it this time, Benjamin? Another bad investment? Gambling debts? His silence was answer enough. Your father built something that could have fed generations if you'd had the patience to nurture it. I laid the envelope on the dresser. Instead, you tried to sell it for quick money. The orchard business is dying, he snapped. Dad was too stubborn to see it, too tied to old-fashioned methods. The development would have made you rich, I finished, while destroying everything your father valued. Everything I valued. You could have had a comfortable retirement. A condo in Florida. No worries. Except the worry of living with the knowledge that I let my husband's legacy be bulldozed for vacation homes. Benjamin shook his head as if I were the unreasonable one. Even now, he couldn't understand. Take the letter and go, I said. Read it or don't. But either way, this is the last time you enter this house. He snatched the envelope and pushed past me without another word. I listened to his footsteps on the stairs, the slam of the front door, the roar of his rental car's engine. Only when the sound had completely faded did I allow myself to sit on the edge of the bed, surrounded by the destruction of Benjamin's last violation. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried since the moment on County Road 27 when I realized my children had become strangers. Instead, I began putting the room back in order, folding Heinrich's flannel shirts that still smelled faintly of him, gathering scattered photos, restoring order to the chaos my son had left behind. As darkness fell, I went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea, carried it to the porch, and sat in Heinrich's rocking chair. Above me, stars began to appear in the clear spring sky. Below me, the orchard stretched into the darkness, the trees we'd planted together, now mature and strong. My phone rang. Klaus checking on me. I'm home, I told him. Benjamin's gone, and you're there alone. Are you all right? I've been alone since Heinrich died, I replied. The difference is now I know it. 3 months later, I sat in the same chair, watching the summer sun set over an orchard heavy with ripening fruit. The harvest would be good this year, maybe our best ever. Not that I'd be handling it alone. The new manager I'd hired, Martin's daughter, Lena, had already proven more than capable. My phone beeped with a message from Lottie. Front page again. Thought you'd want to see. The attached image showed the business section of the Chicago Tribune. Platinum Properties CEO indicted on fraud charges. The subheading mentioned Miller Orchards as the case that triggered the investigation, which ultimately uncovered a pattern of exploiting elderly people in 3 states. I set the phone aside, feeling nothing but quiet satisfaction. Justice, not revenge, though perhaps they were the same thing. Another message came from an unknown number. Mom, please. It's been months. Can we talk? L. I deleted it without responding, just like the 12 before it. Lisa had started reaching out after the scandal broke. After her creditors took her car, her apartment, everything to cover debts she'd accumulated expecting the windfall from the orchard sale. Benjamin never contacted me at all, though Klaus heard he'd been asked to leave his firm when his connection to the fraud investigation came to light. My children were learning the hardest lesson, that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. As darkness fell over the orchard, I rocked gently, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, a distant owl, the creak of the chair against the weathered boards. In my lap was a notebook where I'd been sketching plans for the future of Miller Orchards, a farm-store restaurant in the old barn, educational programs for local schools, expanding our organic practices. Heinrich would have loved these ideas. We'd discussed similar dreams before his illness consumed our conversations with treatments and pain management. "I'm doing it, Heinrich," I whispered into the night air. "Everything we planned, everything they tried to destroy." Tomorrow I'd meet with the attorney handling the establishment of the Heinrich Miller Agricultural Scholarship, a fund for local students studying sustainable farming, financed by the profits my children had tried to steal. Next week, I'd host the first community harvest dinner, inviting the neighbors and friends who'd supported me when I needed them most. And on quiet evenings, I'd sit here in Heinrich's chair, watching over the orchard we'd built, the legacy that would continue without our children, strong and enduring like the trees themselves, not alone in the end, just free. This is my story. Some of you might judge me as harsh, unforgiving. Some might call it cruelty, to cast out my own flesh and blood so completely. But remember what I told you at the beginning. Betrayal by those you've carried in your heart is a wound that transforms you. It burns away sentimentality and leaves something harder, clearer in its place. My children made their choice that day on County Road 27. I made mine every day after. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. Maybe share what you would have done in my place. Would you have forgiven or would you have chosen justice like me? Either way, remember, some people mistake kindness for weakness until they discover too late what true strength looks like. 3 months later, I sat in the same chair, watching the summer sun set over an orchard heavy with ripening fruit. The harvest would be good this year, maybe our best ever. Not that I'd be handling it alone. The new manager I'd hired, Martin's daughter Lena, had already proven more than capable. My phone beeped with a message from Lottie, front page again. "Thought you'd want to see." The attached image showed the business section of the Chicago Tribune. Platinum Properties CEO indicted on fraud charges. The subheading mentioned Miller Orchards as the case that triggered the investigation, which ultimately uncovered a pattern of exploiting elderly people in 3 states. I set the phone aside, feeling nothing but quiet satisfaction. Justice, not revenge, though perhaps they were the same thing. Another message came from an unknown number. "Mom, please. It's been months. Can we talk? L." I deleted it without responding, just like the 12 before it. Lisa had started reaching out after the scandal broke. After her creditors took her car, her apartment, everything to cover debts she'd accumulated expecting the windfall from the orchard sale. Benjamin never contacted me at all, though Klaus heard he'd been asked to leave his firm when his connection to the fraud investigation came to light. My children were learning the hardest lesson, that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. As darkness fell over the orchard, I rocked gently, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, a distant owl, the creak of the chair against the weathered boards. In my lap was a notebook where I'd been sketching plans for the future of Miller Orchards, a farm-store restaurant in the old barn, educational programs for local schools, expanding our organic practices. Heinrich would have loved these ideas. We'd discussed similar dreams before his illness consumed our conversations with treatments and pain management. "I'm doing it, Heinrich," I whispered into the night air. "Everything we planned. Everything they tried to destroy." Tomorrow I'd meet with the attorney handling the establishment of the Heinrich Miller Agricultural Scholarship, a fund for local students studying sustainable farming, financed by the profits my children had tried to steal. Next week I'd host the first community harvest dinner, inviting the neighbors and friends who'd supported me when I needed them most. And on quiet evenings, I'd sit here in Heinrich's chair, watching over the orchard we'd built, the legacy that would continue without our children, strong and enduring like the trees themselves, not alone in the end, just free. This is my story. Some of you might judge me as harsh, unforgiving. Some might call it cruelty, to cast out my own flesh and blood so completely. But remember what I told you at the beginning. Betrayal by those you've carried in your heart is a wound that transforms you. It burns away sentimentality and leaves something harder, clearer in its place. My children made their choice that day on County Road 27. I made mine every day after. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. Maybe share what you would have done in my place. Would you have forgiven Or would you have chosen justice like me? Either way, remember, some people mistake kindness for weakness until they discover too late what true strength looks like.
Ma'am,